Professor Layton, another niche video game series I sunk my teeth into in my teenage years. Visual novels are definitely not everyone's cup of tea, but I always enjoyed slower, more relaxing experiences with interesting stories and settings. And that is where Professor Layton excelled. Nice locales, nice puzzles, well thought out mysteries to solve, and the great gentleman of Hershel Layton at the center of it all. Look at him. Gaze upon this perfect specimen of a character. Earthy, yet simple, color palette. Simple, yet friendly, and inviting facial features. Hat. 10 out of 10 design. I am sure he will see years, no decades, of fruitful adventures as he spearheads himself forward into... Oh. Well, Father Time is undefeated, and a franchise can't ride off the coattails of previous works and characters for too long. So the Layton franchise believed it needed a sort of reboot. And that reboot was Layton's Mystery Journey, Katrielle and the Millionaire's Conspiracy, released in 2017. It was time for the next generation to take the stage, as this game would focus on Layton's daughter and her mystery solving in London. There are definitely some things I like about this game, but there are more than a few things that the game definitely flopped on. It just left me wanting more out of the experience and more out of the new era of the Layton franchise we find ourselves in today. So let's take a dive into this new era, starting with the disappointment that was Katrielle's Mystery Journey. The game starts with a nice little opening movie and a violin cover of some J-pop song. Great stuff, and it establishes one of the things about this game I think they did a solid job on: Katrielle herself. It would have been fairly easy to make a younger female Layton with similar traits to Hershel, but instead they make Katrielle different. Almost too different. Not only is she younger, but that comes with her being more energetic and lively compared to her father. She's running and spinning through town during this opening movie. It breeds a bit of freshness into the series in that regard. As you get into the actual game, Katrielle reveals she is also much less humble about her abilities.
Just make sure to note how great I did, okay? Thanks.
She constantly boasts about how smart she is and how adept she is at puzzle solving. She bosses around her companions, Ernest and Hershel. It's really nice how they make her a unique and new character in this series, rather than a retread on the previous character of Hershel Layton. Now, a fair criticism is that Katrielle is too different, that she is too rude, especially to her own colleagues. She's not presented as a character you want to get behind and be the protagonist you put yourself in the shoes of, but she does have flaws that are apparent off the bat. She may not wait 3 games to show any kind of negative emotion and have opportunities for growth throughout the story. And she can mature into a more appealing personality while still maintaining a cocky and upbeat edge that makes her unique. She just has to be challenged by the other characters. She has to be shown that she can't do everything by herself. She has to be put in situations that show the upsides and downsides of her instinctual investigating approach. Does the game and story capitalize on this opportunity to develop the main character and put her through a satisfying arc? Moving along, the second character we're introduced to is Hershel, a talking dog. Oh boy. Hershel goes to Katrielle because, like most talking dogs, he wants to figure out exactly why he's a talking dog. And that is kind of shelved for the entirety of the game. Every case, even just finding someone's pet, takes precedence over figuring out why this talking dog exists and why he thinks he shouldn't. Kind of amusing how we went from an assistant who can talk to animals to an assistant who is a talking animal. But at least the animals that Luke talks to are aware they don't speak human words. Hershel knows he's speaking human words, doesn't believe he should be a dog, and yet this is something no one really cares about. If you were in one of the prior Layton games, you could maybe make it more feasible that this mystery would be brushed aside. In those games, you have mystical civilizations, time machines, entire secret cities. But in this game, we're just in London. plain old London. So Hershel does not fit in really at all. He's not a mundane, everyday thing. He should not be treated as if he is a fairly ordinary happenstance. Katrielle should be far more willing to pursue the mystery of Hershel, because it is frankly the most interesting case she is ever going to have. Now, even if Hershel doesn't fit in with the world, I can at least give him a pass that he's sometimes entertaining on screen. He is the straight man and common sense character meant to clash with Katrielle's more freewheeling and distractible personality. Hershel is fine, he fulfills his job with some good one-liners here and there. I can live with Hershel O.C. Combs. But then there's Ernest Greaves. And I have just one question for Mr. Greaves.
What would you say you do here?
As briefly as I can put it, Ernest is a simp. Fulton. Ernest likes Katrielle and is hence her assistant. Without pay. Man, he's just so smart. Ernest's feelings are not reciprocated by Katrielle. Katrielle proceeds to be oblivious and friend-zone Ernest for the entire game, so the dynamic does not change at all. Okay, well, don't worry. Ernest is still a very useful assistant that is not reduced to one joke played over and over ad nauseum. He actually adds a ton of value to the game and doesn't wait till the last hour of the game to be relevant in the slightest. I'm also a serial liar. Ernest just spends the game crushing on Katrielle and stroking her ego. Ernest's drab, doting dialogue didn't really faze me my first time playing through, somehow. But now that I've actually read his lines, Ernest is just so tiring to listen to. His character is just one note and doesn't really do anything, unless it's of course asked for by Katrielle. Ernest can kinda work because he's basically the opposite of Katrielle. He's much more shy and patient, while Katrielle is just dousing in 5-hour energies. It provides an interesting dynamic at times, but more often than not, like Hershel, Ernest is completely cornered into I'm no comedic genius. Humor is subjective, different things work for different people, yada yada yada. But let me compare the humor in Katrielle's mystery journey to another game with a tired and overused gag, Xenoblade X. At the start of every chapter, Lyn will cook up a meal, and there will be a food joke leveraged at Tatsu at some point during the cutscene. They go for the same note in the punchline, the animations are even the same. It gets tiring and repetitive. Lyn can't even get her pronunciations right.
What? Don't be silly. You need it spread evenly with the tandoori sauce.
I'm sorry you had to see that.
But if you go down the list of recipes in order, you will end on foie gras. And during that cutscene, things are a little off. It's taking a while to get to the punchline. The previous punchline animation has played, but the joke hasn't happened? What is going on? And then you get hit by...
What can Tatsu provide for Chef Lindley?
Your liver.
Excellent. Comedy masterpiece, Lyn. Good timing, good blunt, deadpan tone, good playing with the expectations of having the 7 bad food jokes before this one. Gold star, Lyn. You have my pass for 50 more bad food jokes, a quota I am sure you will hit. In Ernest and Hersel's case, it is truly just the same jokes going on over and over of Hershel trying to be serious and Ernest being overly complimentary of Katrielle. I think some of it is fine. It's a kid's game, whatever, but it is like all they get to do. And it made me just question, why couldn't Hershel and Ernest have been combined into one character? That combo character is then vastly different from Katrielle. You maintain the reserved character of Ernest, but just make him the straight man that Hershel is. Make him occasionally speak up to call Kat out on her nonsense. If you need to maintain the crush on Katrielle, that's still doable. it's a perfectly fine way of affection to want the other person to be better and try to check them rather than just believing they can do no wrong. We don't really do anything with the fact that Hersel's a dog anyway. We just get a bunch of remarks from other people about how he barks so much. So just fuse the two into one human character. The fusion of Hershel and Ernest would just be a more efficient use of space. Although, almost anything is a more efficient use of space than Ernest. Okay, so main character-wise, we have a hit, a bunt, and a complete whiff. But what about the story those characters are put through? Well, circling back to Katrielle for a bit, I like how being the daughter of Professor Hershel Layton has clearly influenced her life up to this point. Hershel was an archaeology professor who did weird adventures and mysteries on the side. I'm sure that whenever he shared stories about his life with his daughter, the archaeology didn't exactly make it to the forefront. So with this inspiration, Katrielle opens a proper detective business. How did she rent out an office in London when she couldn't be older than an undergrad student? Who knows? I do know that Katrielle has quite a flair for theatrics. Listening to her father's stories about his grand adventures throughout the world has made Katrielle try to play up whatever minor case she has as something bigger than it is. Suspects must be lined up for one big dramatic reveal that can only be solved by the mastermind of Katrielle Layton. She hopes to have an opportunity to be like her father and use her intellect to navigate puzzles of ancient civilizations, world-ending scenarios, and tear-jerking backstories. But no, that is not what Katrielle gets in this game, and it is the game's major flaw. The scope is much smaller than before. The prior Professor Layton games all have one main adventure with smaller mysteries and details unraveling during the process. Even in some of the more tame ones like Curious Village, there's still a very interesting setting and overall goal that we're trying to achieve. In contrast, Katrielle's game is a bunch of smaller individual mysteries with very minor stakes. We're talking missing movie scene, missing pet, missing statue, a whole bunch of nonsense.
What in the heck is all this?
Most of these cases revolve around some very rich people in London, hence the game's name, The Millionaire's Conspiracy. And the main thing all these mysteries have in common is they are completely boring. They are pretty much all resolved through some misunderstanding or coincidence, with no real consequences from the result. Let's just go through the list here. Big Ben has stopped working. Turns out the mechanic broken and swapped it out with a cake duplicate his brother made. There are no consequences for the mechanic or his job. People go missing at a town festival. Turns out it was all staged by the mayor. Again, the mayor serves no consequences for deceiving the general populace. A movie premiere has a missing scene with everyone throwing suspicion around while a bird just shit on the film. Rich lady asks to help her find her pet. That's it. Rich girl asks you to help figure out if and why ghosts are haunting her homes when it just so happens she herself is creating the ghost because she's lonely. Someone has stolen money from a very secure bank vault. Just kidding, the fan malfunctioned. The editor of a newspaper wants to figure out why a local superhero is missing. He's just taking care of his kid. Old detective guy forgot his wife's birthday. That's it. The first 9 cases are just so bland, with all the resolutions being so utterly boring. I kinda understand why Katrielle would rather shop or eat while in the middle of an investigation, because I couldn't be bothered to care about them either. I cannot name a single case where anyone was dissatisfied or expressed really any negative emotion at the end. It just felt like nothing was happening. There was no progress or change to the status quo. Now, I understand that the prior Professor Layton games still had happy endings. Good still triumphs over evil, but at least there is evil. There is a antagonistic force present, and important characters have their lives altered by the mystery's resolution. You got Flora leaving her specially made village. You've got Luke leaving his town. You've got Layton making peace with... Sorry, give me a minute. But in Katrielle's case, there's nothing really happening. There's no antagonistic force that you're repelling with your mystery solving. Characters are more or less sectioned off into their individual cases, so whatever minor consequence there is with them, you won't really care. It again just feels like nothing was happening. I have no better way to describe it.
That won't do. No chance. No, not on my watch.
But then, the second to last case comes along, and holy shit, something has actually happened. The lady who runs the boutique next to the agency has been murdered. Phenomenal. I've never been so happy to have a nameless NPC die in my life. And Katrielle is a prime suspect. After 10 hours of gameplay, we finally have stakes. We're on the run from the police. We're trying to piece together clues in an attempt to clear Katrielle's name. We avoid Ernest for almost the entire case. It's wonderful. This was definitely my favorite case in the game. We kind of raised the stakes a bit. It felt like the result of this case actually mattered. There's a good bit of drama and tension. We are kind of backtracking through locations we had already been to, but I just kind of expected that at this point.
Is anybody surprised about what happened?
No.
So they finally pieced together an interesting case with real stakes. I'm sure they're gonna stick the landing and the resolution will not be really lame. Wrong. The lady died, get ready for this, by accident. A display fell on her and she died.
It'd be funny if it weren't so pathetic.
Even if the real murderer was heavily telegraphed, I would have taken it. It would have created a feeling of satisfaction and the idea that there is an actual villain in this universe. But no, aside from the lady we barely know being dead, there really isn't anything to take away from this. These cases have just felt so barren. There's no real feeling of accomplishing anything through your detective work, like one guy actually went to jail for a crime, because most of the time, there just is no crime or anything to care about with these cases. I don't care about bank security. I don't care about Ratman. I don't care about this rich lady's pet. Especially when she didn't mention the pet she was looking for was an iguana, and for some reason there's pictures of cats all over her house that has running in circles for the entire day. This oh so precious pet that you need us to find with the utmost urgency and care. You can't be bothered to tell us anything about it, give us any details whatsoever, and it's all just for the sake of this one gag at the end.
I just don't have the energy for this.
And you know who comes out the worst out of all this? Katrielle. Kat's flaws simply stay as flaws. There is no space for growth or her coming into her own as a detective. The game does not give her those opportunities. All that really happens is the agency itself and Katrielle gain more notoriety. There isn't a shift in character for the most part. Something that could have been facilitated by Emiliana. Emiliana comes along as a possible rival to challenge Katrielle with the Scotland Yard approach of logic and critical thinking, but Emiliana is never really given a chance to prove that her way of investigating through details, reason, and logic is better than Kat's way of investigating through instinct and quirkiness. Instead, Emiliana just falls in line as a member of the gang and fulfills the trope of someone who presents themselves as super serious, but they're just a big softy underneath. To be fair, it is difficult to develop Emiliana or anyone else's character when the story structure is set up the way it is. How can you make a cohesive and connected through line for your character if you have to assume someone played Case 8 before Case 5? So that entire middle section of the game can't have consequential character shifts or a changing dynamic between Emiliana and Katrielle. While I am still overall fine with Katrielle being a more brash, cocky detective, there is certainly a lot left on the bone that could have been done to better her character. So the main meat and potatoes that you would play a Layton game for feel pretty weak here, with fine characters but a lackluster story to keep a player engaged. But what about the other main aspect of a Professor Layton game? The puzzles. The puzzles are not great. They just feel trivially easy most of the time, and a ton of them are just those kind of read the question carefully forehead kind of puzzles, like where they describe an entire scenario in metrics only to ask a question that technically only requires common sense and the final sentence, and the scenario means nothing. I'm fine with a few of these puzzles to keep players on their toes, but there are just so many of them. The other common flavor of puzzle are ones that just deceive you, and that, again, where you're just meant to read the question carefully and take it at, like, literal value. Again, that's fine in moderation, but again, there are so many of these, where you're just baited for one answer, and then you're able to slide down and figure out the answer it actually wants you to give. There's very few puzzles that are that interesting, that are dynamic and more than you just putting in a number. Like, nothing here really stimulates your neurons the way that, like, Chalice Challenge does. That shit is awesome. Come on, baby, go, go, go. This is the run. This is the one. This is it. The one puzzle in Katrielle Mystery Journey that I struggled with was this shape pen puzzle. I had no idea if there was a strategic way to go about it, and just brute forced it until my head exploded. Now, the prior puzzle master of the games, Akira Tago, unfortunately passed away before this entry, and the duty was passed on to Kuniaki Iwanami. The thing is, I do not blame Iwanami for my lack of puzzle enjoyment in this game, because the easy puzzles and the lack of stakes story all point to the underlying crutch that all of Mystery Journey's problems can stem back to. While a lot of Layton games have started to be ported over to mobile, Katrielle actually released on mobile first, and then on 3DS. To me, this is a signal of trying to draw in a more casual mobile audience, and it's a perfect time to try that since they've now retired the old guard in Hershel Layton. They can go for this new formula where you break the game into smaller chunks that can be digested in short periods of time. Perfect for someone who just plays on their phone when they're commuting or standing in line. When do people play mobile games again? The issue is Katrielle is not really what mobile gamers are looking for. Mobile puzzle games are mostly match 3 for a reason, and that's because no one cares about cutscenes and story and characters in a puzzle mobile game. Mystery Journey can't even be as exploitative or predatory as all those other puzzle games. Like, it has the absolute gall to charge you an upfront base price for a video game?
Blech, I say!
Mystery Journey tries to dip into that more casual mobile market, but couldn't flip the brand entirely, so you end up with the old and the new meeting halfway. It's fine to try to expand your audience and adapt your game to a new environment, but this compromise just ends in a mess. Despite all my complaints, I still think the game is fine. It isn't even my least favorite out of the 7 games. I just think Katrielle, the music, and little things in the game carry it so well. It truly feels like a unique entry in the series, and more importantly, it feels like Katrielle's game. I understand you don't get points just for being different if you're bad, but I will give it some credit for at least breathing in a bit of freshness with a new protagonist that is different from Hershel, and a protagonist that drives certain features in the game. Things like having the office be decoratable is such a small but enjoyable addition here. Hershel was pretty much never in his office and doesn't care for more than simple appearances. Katrielle, on the other hand, certainly cares. It just feels like this game had so much potential that with a new and energetic protagonist, they could have made something pretty darn good. But instead, they make a very soft story that doesn't make the player emotionally attached to anything going on. My eyes watered during this still frame in the opening movie. That's how low the bar is for me, and the final climactic case of this game didn't even get that. Oh wait, I guess I haven't discussed the still frame or the last case. And the last case doesn't matter, whatever. So as you can piece together, Hershel is not present in this game. He has gone missing. And while we do get Kat searching for him at the start and having this nightmare at the start, it is never brought up again. Not until the very, very end of the game, where Kat reveals that Hershel is not her biological father. And I just have no idea what the thought process here was. Why even include the nightmare at the start if it doesn't lead to anything in this game? Is it really just there to bait returning players into thinking Hershel is going to be relevant and there's going to be some kind of emotional payoff you really got to get through all these menial tasks to get to? Only for it to go absolutely nowhere and then in the very end bring Hershel up again so that you're hooked for whatever comes next and you're baited a second time? Is that the idea? Because it worked completely. I thought the last case was going to be about Hershel. It just wasn't. He's missing the entire game, despite the literal invoking moment of the game being about him and Katrielle missing her father and having this void in her life and all that stuff that you could have paid off in any way whatsoever. Wait, what was that? There's an anime? Only in Japan? Hershel's in it? Luke's in it? Emotional payoff? Well, what are we waiting for? Let's get going. Throw that sucker on and we'll... Oh. Okay, at one point back in like 2021, all the episodes were just on YouTube. I watched them during COVID because I was bored. No longer seems to be the case anymore. I think due to music copyright, since that section of the show is muted on any version you find now. But still, shout out to the person who dubbed 50 episodes of this children's show. They definitely had some fun along the way. Big respect to the fortitude and mental sanity it takes to do that. And so here we go. Kat's Mystery Files, airing between 2018 and 2019, only in Japan. Surely here, we have the characters pushed to the limits of what their archetypes provide. Surely here, we have something better than comedy as a crutch for every single case. Surely here, we have a grand mystery concerning Hershel's disappearance, and we're gonna go on a thrilling adventure to find him. Right? Right?
I'm what the kids today call a fucking moron.
Now, as we have discussed, the new era of Layton and Katrielle is geared more towards younger, casual audiences. So the TV show format is still designed for 6-year-olds, and we're still dealing with smaller cases that can be delivered in 20-minute segments. They devise over 40 cases to be solved in this show's runtime. Now, some of the cases from the game make appearances as well with small tweaks, but that's still a lot of original cases for this children's show. So let's start off with the characters. On a character level, they're all still painted the same way, where they all have the same comedic beats of Katrielle's food obsession, Ernest's one-way admiration, and Cheryl's common sense. Overall, I'd say the show paints Katrielle as a much more competent detective. She is just a generally better problem solver and investigator. She has good observation skills, with noticing a chef had his watch on before claiming it was stolen. Her wild and unpredictable problem-solving approach does actually have merit in the show, and leads to solved cases. There's more direction there. Katrielle doesn't just happen to be at the right place at the right time. Instead, she's able to uniquely think outside the box and pursue her wild theories to the ends that they reach. In episode 46, Kat and the gang need to find the real Mona Lisa hidden in an entire exhibit of fakes. They were really stretching for ideas at the end there. Instead of interrogating the paintings with an artistic eye that Kat does not have, she has someone accidentally spill flour to see which painting the curator would cover and protect. Episode 13 starts with Kat's client explaining she's being followed by a doppelganger, and per usual, Kat and the client enjoy some sweets. During the initial debriefing, later on, Kat sits the client down to have pancakes again, seemingly just following her sweet tooth for the umpteenth time, but Kat uses the different ways the client ate the pancakes then versus now as evidence that these are two different people. Kat is also just nicer, doing things like sharing her mint tea when first meeting Emiliana, in spite of Kat only taking this episode's case as a sort of competition against the crime analyst. Kat maintains the energy and theatrics that were fresh in the game, but there's some more genuine good intent here to make her easier to root for. She still abuses her employees, but it is brought up far less often, even in the sake of comedy, or my memory is just selective and I've suppressed those. As for her employees, Ernest and Cheryl don't improve really. They still are just kind of used for comedy. Cheryl being that kind of interjecting one-liner, Ernest being stupid.
I think overprotective might be an understatement.
So yeah, take whatever win you can get. I think Katrielle is better. Ernest and Cheryl, status quo. As alluded to earlier, a large chunk of the episodes still have the low stakes carried over from the game. They do what they can to get some emotional investment in these episodes, but it's also very repetitive. Like a terminally ill parent or sibling always serves as the motivation for whatever's going on. The cases from the games return, mostly with the dead family complication as well. They try to recover some of this stuff and it just does not work. It's hard to really get emotionally invested when it's the same thing over and over. And we're still dealing with pretty minor things like the deed to farmland or some ghost in a photographer's photos. However, there are still a handful of episodes with these low stakes that were enjoyable. And so before we tackle what we're really here for, just want to quickly go through some of these fun episodes that weren't heavy story-wise, but were a good watch nonetheless for the average 6 to 11-year-old. In episode 42, Cheryl's hubris leads him to claim to the dog world that he is the one responsible for all the mysteries the agency has solved. He then gets dragged into trying to solve a dog's murder. The dog's not dead, don't worry. His solo mission doesn't go great, with Cheryl ready to admit he could use some help from Kat to put the clues together, only for Cheryl to observe a food rant from Katrielle that helps him take on a new perspective and solve his case. And then he has like a line of animals inquiring for his services at the end. It's great, has the nice theme of tackling our own prejudices in society. Good stuff. There's an episode where Kat is called to investigate an invisible baby, but is too busy stirring her stew for 6 hours to actually go to the scene, so she solves it over the phone. Having Katrielle cook is nice since it takes her from a food indulger to a food connoisseur. For the case itself, it's a nice shakeup, presenting a new obstacle as Katrielle is unable to see the mystery, and also an obstacle that Katrielle creates herself because of how crazy she is about food. Now a well-minded viewer may inquire, why doesn't she simply leave Ernest to stir the stew while she goes to investigate? To which I say, why would you trust Ernest with anything? While not impossible, I certainly don't think this solve over the phone case is gonna work in a game,
What the dog doing?
Good use of TV as a different medium to be able to make something entertaining here. Alright, wrapping these up, my favorite non-Hershel related episode would be Emiliana and the Last Customer. Katrielle and Emiliana have a competition at a cafe where they try profiling the occupation of the customers. In the video game, Emiliana is never really given the chance to demonstrate how her purely analytical investigation strategy is better than Katrielle's instinctual investigation strategy. Emiliana facades as a rival, but never really pushes Katrielle to be a better investigator or anything. Now, in the anime, we get a nice, cheesy showdown between their opposite forms of deduction. Emiliana is detailed, reasoned, and thorough. Katrielle is cringe. And yet, they still end up being tied at the end of the day. Emiliana detours the game a couple times to play some tricks and pull Katrielle's strings, which is all well and good. Katrielle then correctly profiles the last customer, only for Scotland Yard to jump on the guy and arrest him. And then Emiliana lays out her brilliant deductions that led her to know that this criminal would be at this cafe at this time. With her stakeout complete, Emiliana takes her leave, and Katrielle takes out her frustrations, having served as entertainment for her bitter rival. As mentioned, I wish Emiliana got more to actually do in the game rather than just be a member of the gang, and this episode satisfies that itch. The girl may be job-focused and a strict data analyst, but everyone needs to have fun and entertainment at other people's expense every now and again, you know? Alright, but all that fun, slice-of-lifey nonsense is not our main concern here. Our main concern is the gentleman with the awfully tall hat. As set up and never resolved by the game, Hershel is missing. So the show carves out episodes 10, 20, 34, 35, and the 2-episode finale to tell the story of Professor Layton and the Relics treasure. That's certainly an interesting way to weave the saga in there and expect the viewer to recall things that happened exactly 15 Saturdays ago, but so be it. It starts fine with the first 2 parts being Rosa recalling Katrielle's past and what she knows about Hershel and Luke's disappearance. At least since the cast is waiting to hear more of the story from Rosa, it is a plausible reason for a 10-episode break, kind of. But the remaining 4 parts are entirely sequential. It would certainly ruffle my feathers if I was super invested in the overarching story of my Saturday morning cartoon and got real excited about the cliffhanger they left it on a week ago, only to tune in today and find the cast is back in London solving nonsense mysteries like nothing ever happened.
What the hell?
It also leads to the episodes being very repetitive when viewed back to back because they just weren't intended to be viewed in one sitting. Gotta make sure the 6-year-olds are up to speed on everything that's happened so far. But let's focus on the content here rather than the vehicle. Hershel not being Kat's biological father is pretty predictable for no other reason than the fact that Hershel went through the grief of his lover dying not once, but twice. The game may have themes of leaving the past behind, but I can understand this being unrecoverable for dear Hershel. I'd also say it's appropriate that Katrielle's freewheeling personality takes a back seat more or less when dealing with Hershel's disappearance. For lack of a better term, Kat is able to lock in when it comes to her missing father. We kind of see it in the game with that initial investigation, but never again because Hershel's not related to the rest of the video game. That can also help put Kat's personality into a bit more perspective when dealing with the seriousness of not knowing who your real parents are and having your adopted father disappear. Why treat anything else with that same level of intensity? Katrielle's carefree attitude can be viewed as more of a coping mechanism. To treat whatever small case she has as so beneath her, because her main concern is far more significant. I don't think the game or show properly lay out Katrielle's psyche here, so I'd hardly say this view is ironclad, but I wanted to bring it up nonetheless. So Kat's mother dies shortly after giving birth to her, and her biological father is seemingly absent. That father is who Hershel wants to learn more about. So he and Luke seek to follow Kat's parents' research and embark on an adventure for the Relics treasure. An adventure that has already shown itself to be pretty risky, as Luke has already been kidnapped once over it. But the mystery-solving duo is willing to undertake those risks and abandon Katrielle when she is but 10 years old, all for the sake of her probably dead parents. And herself, I guess, technically. It's understandable that Hershel is willing to go to such lengths to better understand his daughter's past, and why he would want to continue on the mission Kat's mother pointed him towards. Hershel's own childhood is riddled with tragedy and loss after tragedy and loss. After uncovering all he can at the end of Azran Legacy, Hershel rejects his prior family and prior name. There's a bit of brutal irony in Hershel understanding his own real parents were not his biological ones, yet being so obsessed with Katrielle's biological parents. Hershel was at least able to make the decision on who his real family was because he had all the facts. He believes it is better for Katrielle to know of her past than to simply pretend it's not there. That is perhaps what brews this idea of a real family in his mind. He doesn't want Katrielle's past to be hidden. He doesn't want Katrielle finding out 20 years later that her biological father is a cult leader. At least, that seems to be how Hershel rationalizes it to himself. Is the professor just engaging in another mystical journey? Unable to keep his nose out of archaeological discovery? When an opportunity to pursue one of the greatest unsolved mysteries presents itself, who is Hershel to say no? Hershel even says it's pretty likely Kat's dead is long dead, and yet he still chases after the relics, believing it to be so important. And that kind of selfishness is a neat dimension to add on to Hershel's character. A selfishness that he may not even realize is there, because he truly believes this is what's best for his daughter. Why not thrust himself into danger once again if it's for her sake? He's been through the apocalypse, he's been through his own death, and has somehow managed to prevail. Well, he's not going to prevail this time. Despite seeing that their adversaries have the capabilities of moving a chunk of rock the size of a studio apartment, Layton and Luke walk into the lair of their adversaries, completely unprepared, unarmed, and are kidnapped. Also, that's Luke's wife, Marina. Despite being told she is a solid mystery solver, she does not do much of that for now. We now know that Hershel's adventure ended in failure, and that Layton and Luke have been kidnapped so that they don't reveal that this church is harboring some sinister treasure. And they've been kidnapped for 11 long years now. Kind of. Turns out the Relics treasure is actually 3 cryogenic coffins, where 3 subjects are held in an unaging slumber until they are to be released. Fantastic. Magic nonsense, back on the menu, I'll take it. Alright, let's put a pin in our hero's tale to focus on the point of this cryogenic chamber and introduce you to the main villain, Aldebaran. And the timeline is pretty important, so take notes, sweetie. Actually, you know what, I'll help you out. Just this once. In the present day, Aldebaran is talked about like some great, revered mystery solver. And through flashbacks, he reveals himself to actually just be a psychotic, extorting jerkwad. He's a pretty obvious foil to Hershel. While Hershel uses his intellect to aid others, Aldebaran uses his intellect to exploit others. Aldebaran also has an interest in astronomy that he funds with his extortion. Aldebaran discovers a comet will hit the Earth in 110 years, wiping humanity out. He tries to convince others to help avoid this calamity, but no one listens to him, and no one cares. So Aldebaran conceives this idea, that he will put himself in cryogenic sleep for 100 years, and when he reawakens, there will be more advanced technology for him to leverage, with which he will build a magical Relics treasure-fueled shelter and save mankind. Alright, buddy.
I am not crazy!
There are other details about Aldebaran's business associate, but they do not matter. Aldebaran has been in cryogenic sleep beneath this church for 111 years, and Layton and Luke joined him for the last 11. Alright, I think we have all the setup squared away now. Katrielle does some pretty good sleuthing to nail down the path her father was on 10 years ago, and when she goes into the layers of her adversaries, she is actually prepared. With a taser. They're dead. Those dudes are dead. And more importantly, she shows up with the police force, leveraging her previous connection with Mr. Toothpick Arms. There's a quick yet chilling scene where Kat sees her father for the first time in 10 years while he's in cryogenic sleep. Layton and Luke are then taken to a hospital while Kat's crew tries to clean up the loose ends of what happened to Aldebaran, since he wasn't in the 3rd cryogenic container. Aldebaran leads them on a sort of goose chase around various places, until finally...
Katori, 私の考えを聞いてくれるかい? 大きくなったな、カトリー。
私のこと、わかるの？
当然だよ。体は大きくなっていても、自分の娘のことがわからない親はいない。
This is all I really care about here. They introduce the internal anguish and struggle, refuse to advance it in any meaningful way, and yet, when it reaches its resolution, I am still reduced to a puddle. I do not care that the lines are cliché. I do not care that it is stilted. A parent-child reunion will get me every single time. I watched 50 episodes of this baby show, some of them twice. I get to feel some kind of payoff from all this. And now, if we're being real, the rest does not matter. The real mission and emotional climax has been achieved. We're just gonna breeze through the rest. The United Layton Legion confronts Aldebaran. There's a sword fight, and Aldebaran realizes he was asleep for too heckin' long. The calamity he predicted was supposed to happen last year, and evidently has not. Current-day astronomers took Aldebaran's research and determined that while he was right, the comet will not arrive for another 120 years. Realizing he threw away everything in his life for a fruitless endeavor to be humanity's shining savior, Aldebaran takes his own life. His cells were also, like, decomposing, so yeah. The message the gang tries to get through to Aldebaran is quite blunt, but I'll spell it out regardless. There is no need for an individual savior. The individual of today cannot compare to the next generation of tomorrow. One must be comfortable accepting the limits of one's own existence and trust that those who come after will bring about the good times. And instead, it is the responsibility of the individual to value what's in their present, not look too far into the past or too far into the future, and carve out a path of happiness for themselves and those around them. Oh, and also teamwork is good, whatever, but kid show, we know that.
Is anybody surprised about what happened? No!
Overall, the Relics treasure story isn't bad, but it's far from what it could be. The plot is pretty simple, the message very blunt, and the twist of finding out what the treasure is doesn't really hit, given we've seen a completely unaged Hershel in the second opening. Also, remember what I said about it being repetitive? That is not limited to the start of new episodes to catch people up. The story ping-pongs back and forth between the steps Hershel went through to uncover the relics at the church and the steps Kat went through to uncover the relics at the church. So points are essentially repeated back to back within the same minute quite frequently. The story could have also benefited from a greater sense of scale than just random towns in England. It could have delved further into Hershel's motivations behind seeking the truth as his unrealized selfishness. It could have delved into Katrielle's pride or pressure over upholding the Layton name. It could have displayed Kat's more manic approach to puzzle solving like some of the prior episodes, instead of being pretty straightforward. Also, the focus on teamwork and cooperation really just undermines Katrielle's competency. Yeah, the point is that even someone as arrogant as Kat realizes collaboration is important, but it's kind of lame that she's never the sole driving force of discovery. She's either uncovering stuff her father already had or working alongside him. There's like one exception very early on, Seventh Stone, but it's kind of meaningless. Like, think about it. The only difference between Hershel's moment of failure and Kat's moment of success is that Kat brought the police. It again just feels like a missed opportunity to have done a game on this instead and let them cook purely on this plot.
It should have been me!
But as discussed, the simple reunion is all that's needed for me to put a more positive stamp on the anime. The message the anime lays out here has a pretty easy correlation to the status of the Layton franchise at the time. They didn't want to put Layton in a suspended state of animation, solving mystery after mystery time after time. They didn't believe that Hershel and Hershel alone was some chosen one, and the only one capable of uncovering the world's mysteries. They had to be content, moving on to the future and seeing what the next generation of puzzle solvers could do. But World of Steam shows that isn't the actual belief being held. They are trotting out another Hershel Layton game, trying to make it similar to the initial 6, and proposing that actually, Hershel is the only man for the job. It's easy to say you need to move on to the next generation and put Hershel aside. It's harder to do that in practice when a gaggle of other new ideas and directions pulled down that new era. And so in truth, I can't really blame them for this direction. Hershel's disappearance and Katrielle's past have already been uncovered via the show. The opportunity for a game to tell a more thorough and complex story about Hershel's disappearance has long since passed. Well, who else can a new game shed some light on? Ernest's backstory was uncovered via the game. Really, the only loose end to tie up is Hershel, but his troubles have been so cornered into comedy, it would be hard for me to take him seriously if there was some grand quest to uncover who he was. And the show ends with a united Layton detective agency, so why would Katrielle go on some fantastical journey with just her gang of new characters? Wouldn't everyone else want to tag along if there's a great mystery afoot? And now that we've gotten to the subject, how on earth are all of them on payroll for the mystery agency? Like, I don't think Hershel can just walk back and get his university job after being missing for 10 years. I don't know what job Luke had, but I'm guessing he's in the same boat. You would think Marina was holding a job for the last 10 years, but actually she was undercover at the church, so she doesn't really have a job either. I'm wondering if she even has the house still. Ernest is a student at university. Yes, I get he doesn't get paid. And then Cheryl's a dog. The agency was Katrielle's full-time job and sole source of income. How on earth is payroll supposed to work here? But anyway, if they did want to make a game that kept the spotlight on Katrielle, the only plausible option I've brainstormed is a game that takes place before Mystery Journey. And it is some grand adventure outside of London that Katrielle goes on that provides some basis for her arrogance before opening a detective agency. The issue then is that Ernest, Hershel, and Emiliana would be absent. While I can certainly live with one of them being axed, it would require another fresh start, another start from scratch, an idea that is much less appealing after the last new idea was botched in most fans' minds. And if we're being real with the Layton franchise, they are at their best when the plots hit close to the protagonist. When we see Hershel struggle, go through emotions, and be more than just a polite puzzle-solving machine. The Unwound Future ending is not good solely because it's sad. It's good because Hershel is legitimately upset and rattled. The line of, "I can't, I won't," does so much for this scene to make it stick. But just like a new Katrielle game, a new Hershel game with him and Luke doesn't have much to explore in a personal regard. They've already taken Hershel's parents, brother, best friend, girlfriend again, and daughter temporarily. Just leave him alone. Luke is also around the same age in World of Steam as he was before, so I don't think Marina or anything about her past is really in play either. It does feel like we're just trying to turn the clock back and pretend that this new era didn't happen, that we can just take everything that was built up and brush it under the rug. And you know, that may work. I hope World of Steam is good. I hope it's a fun, western, steampunky adventure that brings me to tears at the end. But I just can't bring myself to expect that when the recent endeavors just felt flubbed and it feels like all the corridors have closed, and that instead we're trying to re-trek back, try to grapple on to what little we have left of the past, rather than accepting that mistakes were made with the future, but there are still ways to push forward and make it work. Obviously easy for me to say with a clicker rather than in a boardroom, but the path of constantly trying to reinvigorate the past is not a fun one. And that's the truly disappointing part. They had their golden goose. They had a possible co-protagonist setup with Katrielle and Hershel. They had an emotional set piece that could hit Hershel like no other. And after failing to reach those possible heights, it's time to fall back down to the status quo. To the belief that the professor's same ho-hum solid performance will give some respite, simply because it's familiar. The era of Katrielle was not made different for no reason. To withstand the tides of time, a franchise has to push forward, adapt, innovate, regardless of whatever hurdles and stumbles ensue. Change is not always going to be good, but it is the only path forward, lest you fade into the sands of irrelevance.